Hey there! If you're staring down a philosophy of religion essay on the teleological argument, you are exactly in the right place. I'm absolutely thrilled to be your guide today. We're going to take all those incredibly dense philosophical concepts and distill them into a clear, structured masterclass so you can walk into that exam hall with total confidence. We are talking about the ultimate question here. Does the complex design of the universe actually prove there is a God? Get ready to take some mental notes because we're building the ultimate essay blueprint right here, right now. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our mental scaffolding for today's explainer. 1. Setting the foundation. 2. Aquinas, Paley, and Tenet. 3. An analogy comparison template. 4. The heavy-hitting criticisms. And finally, 5. Evaluating the arguments. Section 1. Setting the foundation. Key terminology. So, every top-tier essay starts with solid definitions, right? You absolutely need to anchor your paper with these two vital terms. First up, the teleological argument is an a posteriori argument. That's just a fancy Latin phrase meaning it's based on external evidence. Think of it like looking outward. Philosophers are observing the physical world first, gathering evidence, and then working backward to figure out its origin. And because of this, it's also an inductive argument. This means it leads to a probable conclusion, not an absolute mathematical certainty. It basically says, hey, based on the evidence we see, it's highly probable that a designer exists. Keep these two terms in your back pocket. They're going to be your essay's best friends. Now, what exactly are these philosophers looking at out there? Well, teleological arguments generally point to four main features of the universe that practically scream designer, because they're just too incredibly unlikely to happen by sheer random chance. First, we've got order. The incredibly reliable laws of physics and the regularities of nature. Second, benefit. The fact that the universe provides everything necessary for life, plus extras like beauty. Third, purpose. Objects seemingly working towards an ultimate end, or telos in Greek. And finally, suitability for human life.
Section 2. Aquinas, Paley, and Tenet, the big three.
Let's look at how this whole idea evolved over time. Showing your examiner that you understand the historical progression is a fantastic way to demonstrate deep subject knowledge. We're starting way back in the 13th century with St. Thomas Aquinas and his famous Fifth Way. Then we leap forward to the 19th century with William Paley, who gives us perhaps the most famous analogy in all of philosophy. And finally, we bring it right into the 20th century with Fr. Tenet, who actually modernized the argument to work alongside the theory of evolution. All right, let's break down Aquinas first. His writing in the Summa Theologica can be, a bit dense, so let's chunk it down into 3 logical steps. Step 1. He observed that inanimate things in the natural world completely lack knowledge. Step 2. Yet they consistently act for an end to obtain the best possible result. They follow order. Step 3. Since they don't have their own brains, they must be directed by an outside intelligence. Think about his brilliant archer and arrow analogy. An arrow has literally no mind of its own, right? It only hits the bullseye because a skilled archer aims it and fires it. For Aquinas, the natural world is the arrow, and God is the archer, providing that essential governance. Fast forward a few centuries to William Paley. He famously argued that if you were walking along and found a pocket watch on a heath, you wouldn't just assume it appeared there randomly like a rock. No way! Its complex, perfectly working parts clearly imply a watchmaker. And this brilliantly illustrates Paley's dual approach to design and nature. He split it into 2 categories. Design qua purpose looks at how intricately parts fit together for a highly specific function. He compared the crazy biological complexity of the human eye to a designed instrument, like a telescope. Then there's design qua regularity, which zooms way out to observe the incredible order of the cosmos, like gravity and the precise rotation of the planets. He saw God's fingerprints in both the microscopic and the telescopic. But hold on, what happens when Charles Darwin enters the chat and introduces evolution? Does the whole design argument just collapse? Well, not according to Fr. Tenet in the 20th century. He introduces this concept called the anthropic principle. Anthropic simply meaning related to being human. He argued that the universe is so insanely fine-tuned to sustain life, and evolution itself is so perfectly calibrated to eventually produce intelligent beings capable of rationally analyzing the universe, that the evolutionary process itself must be the ultimate tool of a designer. He didn't fight the new science. He actually absorbed it right into the argument. But Tenet didn't actually stop there. He also introduced the aesthetic argument. He pointed out that evolution really only requires us to survive and reproduce, right? It operates purely on the survival of the fittest. So why on earth do humans have the capacity to be moved to tears by a beautiful sunset, or to deeply appreciate art, music, and literature? Tennant argued that this appreciation for beauty has absolutely zero survival value. Therefore, a purely random universe wouldn't produce it. He concluded that an omnibenevolent, loving God must have designed the world not just for us to survive in, but to actually truly enjoy. Section 3. Analogy Comparison Template. Okay, this is a great mental screenshot for your exam. Let's structure these thinkers by contrasting how each one utilized a totally different analogy to prove a slightly different point. So, the crucial point is this. Aquinas uses the archer and arrow to prove that God actively directs the inanimate parts of the world. Paley uses the watch on a heath to prove that complex, purposeful mechanisms absolutely require an intelligent designer. And then Tennant moves past simple objects altogether, pointing to the fine-tuned universe itself as a massive environment meticulously structured specifically for intelligent human life. Boom! That right there is perfect essay structure. Section 4. The heavy-hitting criticisms, Hume, Kant, and Mill. Now for the counter-arguments, absolutely crucial for hitting those top evaluation marks. Let's rapid-file through David Hume's absolute takedown of analogies. First, he argued that analogies like Paley's are just fundamentally flawed. We have experience seeing houses built by humans, so we know they have builders. But we have absolutely zero experience watching universes being built, so we just can't assume they're made the same way. Second, the universe is entirely unique. You can't realistically compare it to a pocket watch. Third, even if there is a designer, why assume there's just one? A ship takes a whole crew of builders. Maybe the universe was made by a committee of gods. And finally, if everything complex needs a designer, well, who'd find the designer? Hume basically drops the mic with the infinite regress problem. Then we have Immanuel Kant, who takes a slightly different, kind of more psychological approach. Kant suggests, hey, maybe the universe is actually pure chaos, but our human brains are just hardwired to process information by organizing it. We impose order onto the world because that's literally the only way we can understand it. We see a designer because we desperately want to see one. However, and this is fascinating, Kant had a deep respect for the argument. Even though he ultimately rejected it as absolute proof, he actually called it the oldest, clearest, and most in accord with common human reason. It's a very nuanced take that examiners absolutely love to read. And then we have to confront the problem of evil, brilliantly highlighted by John Stuart Mill and often vividly illustrated by modern thinkers like Richard Dawkins. Take a listen to this striking example. A female digger wasp paralyzes a caterpillar, carefully guiding her sting right into its central nervous system to keep it alive, just so her larva can feed on it fresh from the inside out. It's horrific, right? But it's a brutal reality of nature. Mill looks at brutal examples like that digger wasp alongside, natural disasters and devastating diseases, and he makes a really devastating point. If we're judging the creator strictly by the creation, then the extreme cruelty and unnecessary suffering built into the very fabric of nature, well, it doesn't exactly point to the loving God of classical theism. Mill's incredibly harsh conclusion is that either there is no God at all, or the designer of this universe is utterly incompetent or deeply, deeply immoral. Section 5. Evaluating the arguments. All right, the final stage of your essay blueprint, weighing it all up. On the plus side, the teleological argument has some seriously enduring strengths. It uses simple, comprehensible analogies that just click with our everyday human reason. And as Tennant showed us, it can be surprisingly compatible with modern science, like the Big Bang and evolution. Also, modern philosophers like Richard Swinburne argue that when you combine it with other arguments, like the cosmological or moral arguments, it creates a really powerful cumulative case. Even if it's only probable on its own, a bunch of probable arguments stacked together makes a very strong overall case for God. But you have to counter with the main weaknesses, and they are pretty severe. Remember our definitions from the start? This is an inductive argument. That means it can only ever lead to a probable conclusion, literally never an absolute, undeniable proof. More importantly, Darwinian evolution and genetic mutation provide a highly successful, scientifically backed alternative explanation for biological complexity, all without needing a designer whatsoever. And as Hume pointed out, forcing the vastness of nature into neat little analogies of man-made objects might simply be a massive logical trap. Which brings us to the end of today's explainer, and basically the beginning of your essay's conclusion. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. As you sit down in that exam hall, you really have to decide. Does the undeniable, breathtaking complexity of our universe point directly to a master designer pulling the strings? Or does it simply reflect our very human, deeply psychological desire to find some comforting order in an otherwise chaotic void? Wrestle with that question, pick a side, back it up with the scholars we've covered today, and you are going to write an absolutely brilliant essay. Good luck.